Following program is a real estate and mortgage show and does not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Good morning and welcome to Your Home, Your Money with your hosts, Randy, Jackie, and Anthony, right here on Reality Radio 101. To get on board, send us an email. Our email address is yourhomeyourmoney101@gmail.com. And now, right to your hosts of Your Home, Your Money, Randy, Jackie, and Anthony.
Actually, Anthony and Jackie, both MIA. Jackie's on appointment. Anthony is helping his family. So you got me. And I'm looking back, as I told you guys I would look back at 1989 and the crash there and, some of the differences. And it looks like 1996 was the sort of bottom. So, hey, hello, come in. 1996 was the bottom, and we're just that took basically 6 years for the bottom to hit, and then for it to start to climb up. So we got it starts to go up in 97 and 98, and then and then goes back to 97 prices, and then in 99, and then 2000 we're up at 221. So yeah, what? No, that's all. Actually, those are all 1999 numbers. Sorry. Okay, so I'm looking at this on my phone. It's a little bit difficult to really see the whole screen, what's going on there. But in a nutshell, because we're trying to figure out, are we in a 1989, 1990 crash? Many people are saying no. I even heard, Royal LePage put out an announcement that things are going to get better next year. I don't know how that's possible. Let me just say this. It's really simple. Next year is not going to be better, okay? For those of you, it's going to be a mixed bag of nuts, but it's not going to get better. There's too many pressures on the market in terms of the number of people who have to renew their mortgages, and their interest rates would have grown from a small one to a higher one. However, they will probably, in some cases, what we'll probably see is a total refinancing of their mortgage. So they won't continue their mortgage. So, how a mortgage can work is that, after every 5-year term, you can just continue paying down your mortgage as, your original 25-year. And so you would have 20 years left and you sort of keep going. But what we'll probably see is people will refinance their mortgage and therefore lose that equity play. They won't lose it. It will be a much weaker play than what it was before. And so basically, if you are going from a 25-year amortization and you use 5 years of it, you've got 25 years, you've got 20 years left to pay off your house. Now, if you do a refinance and you move your 20 years that you have left to reorganize your payments back to 25 years or possibly 30 years to make your payments lower, you will end up paying a lot more money for the house, right? But you're going to be able to afford to stay in it. So the truth of the matter, you're only really committing to this for the next 5 years. So is it one of those things where you actually roll it back and you, basically slow down your payments on interest? So that you can, so you're going to pay more on, you're going to slow down your payments on principal, and higher interest rates, so you're going to have more interest. It'll take you longer to pay off your home, and you're kind of starting over. Even though you've paid 5 years, you have 20 years to pay it off. But because it's such a challenging time, in many different ways, you've decided that the only way that this could really work for you is to stop this more aggressive plan of paying for your home, paying it off, and going to a much longer, so a 5 year longer or a 10 year longer, which means you're going to pay a lot more in interest, but you're able to keep your home and you don't have to go running somewhere else. And then instead of having like a $1,500 increase or $1,000 increase or whatever, you'll have a few $100s of an increase. And so that could be more palatable and not really looking at or considering the interest payments that you are going to incur over those period of time. You're sort of giving that up to be able to survive. And so I think, that's a variable that that will come into play, but it's only really going to be in play for some of the parties. I mean, there are some considerations there. One of the considerations are maybe even that extra $300 is really tough, or $200, or whatever the extra money you'll have to make on your payments. Your higher interest rate, your longer amortization, your increased interest payments, which would be substantial over the term of the mortgage or over that period that you're going into. Those are the things that you're considering. And if it's all really too much, and then you decide, hey, listen, I need to sell, then you run now into the market head on, which is not going to be an easy achievement. So, one of the big differences I'm noticing here from the 1990 crash, or 1989 or 90 crash, it's called the 1990 crash, one of the biggest differences is that in 1990, which was, the basically it started in 1990, we are seeing transactions drop, but then quickly go up. So in 88, there were 61,400 transactions. And then in 89, there were 47,000. So we had already did quite a decline in the 1989. And the decline, is 13,000 or something transactions that had declined off of 61, which is quite substantial. And then in 1990, it dropped again to like 31,000, which is basically like half the transactions. And so if we compare that with our marketplace today, the first year we had a decline to half the transactions. And then it started hovering in and around there, in and around the 65,000 to 70,000, 60 to 70,000 range in there, where the transactions, whereas prior to that, we were looking at like 127,000 transactions. So, that half drop is something that we have kind of seen before, back in the 90s. And so, but then what is really different about the 1990 crash, is that in 91 transactions went up. In 1990 there were 31,000. In 91 they're 49,000. In 93 they're 46,000. In 94 they're 52,000. In 95 they're 47,000. In 96 65,000. In 69,000. And in 1998 66,000. So what we're seeing is a creeping up. It's sort of like weaving itself up, having a strong year, then not so strong, then stronger, then not so strong, then strongest, and then not quite as strong, and then it just kind of kept creeping upwards. And in terms of transactions, in 99 we had 71,000. In 2000 we had 70,000. But in 2000 our average price was 243. Meanwhile, back in 1990 we were, or 19, let's say 90, or going across on my phone is very complicated here. Let me go across. We're looking at the 250s up to 290, and then in 2000s we're looking at 243. So we're really looking a decade later, and we're just sort of kind of arriving back into a positive situation where we have pricing that will work with what was happening a decade ago. So that was the average price for all property types. But if you go and you look only at single detached, which would give us, it breaks the categories down a little bit more, so the data becomes a little bit cleaner. There are less fuzziness in the data because you're not going across a whole bunch of different types of properties. You're staying with one, and that's a single family only. And then we're looking at 273 being the high, and going down to 243 a decade later was the price. And in between that, we had, it dipped below 200 in 96. So that was the low period in 96. So that's basically what's happening with pricing. And what we're sort of seeing on the ground right now is kind of a little bit of a tough time. If we are to look at, let's say, transactions, we're probably going to be in the 65 somewhere range, 60 something. It's going to be below probably 70,000 for the year. So that's what we're going to close out with, and so we're definitely in the half of the transaction sort of situation, which is where it kind of bottomed out in the 90s, but it happened a lot faster. It happened in 2 years as opposed to happened right away and then hovered there. So we've been kind of hovering, this year being worse than last year. Last year we were in the 70,000s. This year we'll be in the 60,000s in terms of transactions. In terms of pricing, we're going to see a decline in price for sure. We'll see when it's all said and done in January and we get all the figures for last year. We're going to see that the average price has declined this year. And so, we're having a 22, 23, 24, 25, and we're still declining. And I don't see that changing much next year at all. I don't see that as the way things are going to work, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It's a challenging thing. And to be honest, it's probably, we're hovering closer to the bottom of the price drops, which are much stronger. Like the pricing's holding a lot stronger than I probably would have anticipated if I would have sat back and thought about it, which I didn't. But if I did, with the mess that we're going through, I would have probably thought we wouldn't be holding prices as strong as we are while they're declining, and they're declining quite rapidly in some areas like the condo area, which I will have to be honest, if you listened to me a few years ago, I was warning of the, people not to make condo purchases. The condo market is not stable, even though it was doing well. But the whole market was doing well. So everything, good or bad or ugly, was doing well. But now what we're seeing is now that the market is not as strong and transactions are quite low, in terms of 65,000 transactions is quite low. And now that we're seeing a marketplace like that where buyers can be picky, what we're seeing is in the areas where the value is just not there, the buyers are just not biting at all. And so we have this juxtaposition between buyers and sellers, basically struggling to achieve a happy medium. Buyers are tending to go into homes with extremely low offers. Sellers are telling them to take a hike. We're not selling it that, and in some cases can't even sell it that. But then there's other situations where buyers are trying these low ball offers and they're actually getting accepted, which is bringing buyer confidence to the low ball situation, but they aren't as common as we'll probably see next year because 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 homes are selling. It depends on the neighborhood. There are some condo buildings that, it'll be higher than 1 in double digits are selling. And it'll be a very tough process for sellers to get out of. I was listening to another podcaster. I really think that he's excellent. And is doing a really good job at captivating the real estate market. And he's not really doing any fluff or anything of that. He's staying away from charged topics, anything to do with politics or anything. He's keeping that right out and keeping it clean, which is probably a pretty smart thing to do since we're pretty polarized on our views when it comes to that. And in some cases, some people will actually hate you for having an opposing view today. This is just kind of the unfortunate world that we're living in. And so what I found on that show and what I was hearing was that actually sellers need to, in order to be able to navigate this marketplace, they need to get ahead of the marketplace because it's a declining marketplace. And so if you're just matching the marketplace and the marketplace continues to go down, you are already behind the marketplace as you're marketing your home. And so I thought that was quite interesting, and it is true. I just never really looked at it like that. Are we giving that kind of advice? Not exactly. The advice that we're looking at is we're looking at that snapshot period of time with our sellers. What we typically do is we will educate them on current pricing long before they go to the market. Because it's a process, it's probably not a good idea to go to the market in the way in which you live in your house, because we live for comfort. We live for our personal lifestyles. We don't live to sell and maximize our house sales. No, nobody goes, very few people would ever even consider that, living a stage life. There are a couple of people out there, but they're few and far between. And so there are some adjustments that most sellers need to make in order to, when their home goes on the market, to have it prepared in the best possible ways so they can maximize their return. So so now we're talking to them early in the process and giving them their pricing then, but we also tell them that this is just an exercise in helping you to understand probably the best foot forward. However, how to put your best foot forward. However, when you actually are about to land on the market, we will have to do this entire process all over again because of the speed of which the marketplace is moving downward. So, we have spoken to a lady a few months ago. I gotta say, I really kind of probably have lost track of time a little bit, but I am guessing that it has to be almost a year ago. We spoke to her about her situation, and her situation was challenging at that time. And the price, this particular person, who we were just meeting for the first time, had purchased the property and paid the highest price ever recorded in that building. And so that was a huge challenge for them. And we did a CMA on their property because they were asking for, to sell. And at that time, their value was 100 and change below what they had paid for it. And so we went through, the scenario on that, and we got a call last night that she's ready to go, and she happened to have mentioned a price. And the last sale in the building is now, and her price was about 100 and change below what she had purchased. And now the last price in the building, the last one that sold, is over $300,000 below what she purchased for. So that's really, really, really bad news. And that doesn't happen everywhere. But this is a very rare situation where, the person may have got caught up in some form of frenzy, FOMO situation. What they had explained to us is that they had did the entire process through their mortgage agent, which was part of their community, and that's how they got the agent and all that stuff. And it really didn't appear that they had the best representation, because, even at that time when they purchased, I will agree, it was near the peak of the marketplace. But even at that time, you're still and I can say this with all sincerity, is all of the clients that we represented now, we are very strong in the seller market. That's our flagship process. And honestly, in my opinion, and it's a biased opinion, of course, because, I've been doing this for a while and I take it very seriously. So we believe we've created probably one of the best buying system for sellers, a seller system that is out there. But even with buyers, one of the things that we do take pride in is to ensure that we try to get them the best deal, even in a rising market. We are still analyzing the marketplace and having this is not a good price at all. This is not a good property. Let's find another one where we can get at least market value. Because at that time, you couldn't get below market value. The buyers were pretty much being shoved upwards to compete upwards for properties. But as a buyer's agent, is your job just to get them that house at all costs, or is it to get them good value? Well, for us, we believe it's to get good value, and then it's up to them if they want to go out onto a limb, because we're there to support them. But we're going to tell them very seriously, very honestly, that that is not a good deal. And in that particular situation, that was probably a really bad purchase. And we wouldn't have stood behind our client with a purchase like that. We would have told them that they're actually making a wrong decision. However, it is their decision. And so there's always that fine line between educating your client and doing as they tell you. But from the story that we gather, and we're only gathering one side of the story because we're just speaking with the client a year or two after they've purchased the property during a peak period, the client is saying that no, they were sort of more moved into that scenario. And that's really a shame. And today, unfortunately, it looks like the only thing that can really remedy that is losing the property, because there is no way to bring $300,000 to the table. And so this will be one of those situations where if we were to try to help, which to be honest with you, I don't believe there is a way to help this particular situation. If you don't have the $300 to be able to close on the property, it's probably best to have a discussion with your bank and negotiate how it is you're going to exit. And so, that's really where it needs to be. Now, we can help with that process. We can certainly try to negotiate some terms that you may not have considered. Or if you're out there and you're in this situation, you're kind of wondering, well, what would your team pros negotiate on my half? There's nothing to negotiate. I owe way too much money. And yeah, I kind of agree. There's not a lot to negotiate. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't really call it a negotiation. I would call it a pleading of sorts, and probably going to fall on deaf ears. However, nonetheless, our job is to try, right? And so what will we try? Well, we would basically do some homework so that the bank can see clearly the current value. And there is one other little tiny thing in this. Remember, the bank will actually not lose. Now, for some of you who say, what do you mean the bank won't lose? Yes, they will. They're out $300,000. Well, no, CMHC or the insurer is the one that's going to lose. And that's the process will need to be in some ways negotiated also with the insurer, because they're the ones that are actually going to be out the money. And so what they'd be asking is for the bank to go through the process to get to the other side and try to do it in such a way that we lose the least amount of money. Now, if this person was going to stay in Canada, then negotiating a way to stay in the house is a plausibility as well. It's a pretty tough one, but it's a plausibility. There are programs out there that can sometimes help with that, and you do go through your bank. It's probably a good idea to get your realtor or mortgage agent to assist you with it. But if your bank would work with the insurer and they work on getting you to keep your home plan, as opposed to them just taking a huge loss right now plan, and hopefully we can weather these conditions, sometimes they can be open to it. And so these are scenarios that are out there. They're very, 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 very possible. They're just not easy. They don't always come true. or come through, but it is really the only route left, right? So one of the things, and I said, if you were to go through this process and you're going through it yourself, and maybe your realtor doesn't know much about it and your mortgage agent doesn't know much about it, it is a process that the insurer does have. Especially if you're insured with CMHC, that's actually a government insurance. So, but the other insurers also want to be able to compete, and they're not happy about losing, a large chunk of money either. So any way to weather that, any way to weather that is definitely a positive. Plus, the banks will tell you they're really not in the business of power selling homes. They do it because they have to, but that's not their business. It's not where they want to go. They want the payments to come in regularly, come in time, so that their administrative flow works with ease, and it doesn't need any sub-clauses or people making phone calls about getting the money and all that stuff. They don't want any of that hassle. They just want to get their money, take their cut, give the investors their cut, and move on with life. Now, one of the things that you can go through with the process, and the first step is to go through with your bank, is to then explain to them the situation. I think it's probably a good idea that you have some proof of value, because it will help them to understand their situation is dire, and so is yours. You're both in a not a good situation. However, at this point, you are leaving the country. And so this house is going to become the bank's situation. How would you like to handle this? Do you want me to try to get the most amount of money? Because here's what happens. If the seller is distraught, they are going to pack up and leave, and the house is not going to be in the best of conditions or showing. It won't. And the banks aren't doing anything to make it show better. As a matter of fact, it's getting into winter here, so they'll probably tape up the toilet and put a sign on it, don't use this, there's no water in this house. And they're going to do things like that, which aren't going to inspire buyers to purchase the home. They're not going to be buyer attraction magnets for people who want to move their families into their home. It's going to be an attraction magnet to the person who's looking to get the biggest deal and do the work themselves. So the buyers that they're attracting are the ones that are dragging the prices down, as opposed to trying to attract a buyer that actually wants this for their family and is not trying to steal a deal. They're just trying to get a deal. And so, it really matters what buyer you're going after. And the ideal buyer is the lifestyle buyer. That's the buyer that if you get that person is willing. That person doesn't put great deal as their number one priority. Their number one priority is to get a home that perfectly suits their situation. And in many cases, it has a lot to do with not doing any work whatsoever, because they work so hard now. And they work really hard. They don't want to put work into their home. So if it needs work, it's the wrong house. Forget about it. I don't even want the good deal. No, that's not the kind of house I'm looking for. I'm looking for the house that does not need for me to own a screwdriver. I want it to look good. I want it to be in great repair. I want to be able to move my stuff in. And that's as much stress or energy that I want to put into my home. And the rest of it, I'm going to put it into my lifestyle, my children, my wife, my work. and my family, my friends. That's where I'm putting my energy. That's the buyer you want to go after, because that buyer isn't putting a downward pressure on pricing. As a matter of fact, in many cases, they'll put an upward pressure on pricing if that home fully suits their needs. So this is really important for the bank to understand that if they were to take it over, they are not equipped, or nor is it their focus to create a environment that would attract the lifestyle buyer. That is not what they do. However, if we do that, then we would attract that higher price point. So what is the difference? You could be looking at $20, $30, $40, $50,000 difference between the lifestyle buyer and the handyman buyer. And really, what's it all stemmed from? The way in which the homeowner is going to exit the home. Now, those $20, $30, $40, $50,000 are not going to go into the seller's hands. It's going to reduce the amount of money that the bank owes. And so if we understood and if we were able to get, and the bank is going to be a little bit tough, we're probably going to have to start there and then move to the insurer, because the insurer is really the one that's taking the hit. The bank just would rather kind of move on to make money. In this case, there's no money to be made. So they're not as interested in the conversation, but they will hear you out. But, you try to get that concept across to the bank that if you control the sale, the house is going to look better. You'll have better buyer attraction, which will most likely fetch the highest potential dollars given the situation. And if the bank were to do the exact same thing and have the house today, it is not going to have as many buyer attraction features in it, and therefore the price is going to be more negotiated downwards, and they're going to lose more money. So this may be their best way to handle this, and the bank may or may not agree with that. That's where you start. You end with the insurer going through the same process, being considerate. Don't be emotional. It isn't, for them, it's not emotional. For them, it's, if they had a way to help you and to create a hero story that they've done, they would enter into it. They would want to do good by you. But in this particular situation, there is no hero situation, because you're not actually going to remain in the home. And that would have been their number one priority, is how do we help these people to not be homeless or not be in the home? But that's not really the scenario that we're selling them. So that's something to keep in mind. But nonetheless, it's really the only shot that you have at trying to get out of it with owing the least amount of money after the transaction is done. So let's say, instead of owing, let's say it sells for $380 or $580 or whatever, as opposed to, $400 or $600, then that's $20,000 of difference that you don't owe to the bank, because the bank is going to want, or CMHC or the system is going to want to have somebody be on the hook for that monetary loss. So, I don't know how many of you out there are in that situation. It is really a tough situation. If you want to navigate it and be as responsible as you possibly can, there's a couple of ways to go about it. There's the ideology behind it, and how we would possibly position it and negotiate it. And I feel that the word negotiation might be the wrong word there, but how we would plead our case and look for a solution of some sort to make it all work. So that's that is what it is, and I guess that's the end of that. Now, where are we in terms of finding how the market is doing? The market right now is really a conversion market. It's we're converting out of the very fast-paced sellers marketplace that we were in to a adjusting market where we are trying to find out where the best pricing for Canadians versus income for Canadians versus interest rate for Canadians versus lifestyle choices such as eating and different cost inflation. And we're trying to find out where the dust settles there. And once all that comes together, which should probably I don't believe that we're in the period of dust settling. I still believe that there's, the dust is flying all over the place and still moving. The dust is still moving upward. It's not settling downwards yet. I believe that possibly after next year, it may have reached its peak at, blowing northwards or up into the sky, and it's starting to fall down, and we'll start to see a cleaner vision forward. But does that mean that buyers should not buy now? No. If your lifestyle is saying that this is when you got to do it, it'll all work itself out in the wash. And the reason why I say that is because it's just been around for so long. Our first house that we bought, we overpaid for that house, but it was the only house on the market that had big wide aisles because my grandmother at that time, the government had called, actually, it was friends of ours inside the government that found out that this was what's happening and that I'm her grandson. And they called me and said, hey, this is what system's about to do to your grandmother. They're about to put her in a home and take her out of her apartment and that. And I'm like, well, I don't have the greatest relationship with her, but let's let bygones be bygones. And I guess I'll try to move her in with me. And at that time, I was just forming a relationship with my now wife. And we needed to get a home that would house my wife and I and my grandmother. But the problem was that because my grandmother was, basically going through the process of not being able to help herself, we had to consider things like, okay, well, we need a main floor bedroom. We need wide aisles for a wheelchair and things of that nature. And so those were big considerations for us. So it kind of ruled out things like townhouses and things like that. And so we really had to look at, and we wanted to start a family too. So it was probably a good time to get something that could also build with a family. And then her and her mother were talking, and then they decide that she will come and live with us also. And it's like, wow, this is fantastic. Okay. So she's going to move from Newfoundland. And so we needed now from basically her and I needing something to her and I and my grandmother, to her and I and my grandmother and her mother, to us being wanting to have a family as well. So now we're not looking at a smaller home. We're kind of forced to look for something that would host that vision. So we did not find anything on the market. We were, feverishly looking. Of course, we had a budget because it was Jackie and I that were making this purchase. My grandma was not in a situation to be able to help in any way. And her mother wasn't in the situation either. So we ended up knocking on a door. So I went and knocked on doors of houses that I thought would fit us that had tried to sell. And spoke to one gentleman. He goes, "Yeah, I would still sell but I need to get my money." I go, "But you tried to sell at that price. It didn't work. The house isn't working." "Well, then I'm not selling." Talk to my brother, whatever. Anyways, we ended up working up a deal. We gave him the money he needed because the house had big, wide aisles. It was actually 3,300 square feet, so it was a big home. Had a bedroom or two that we could have on the main floor, and still have a living room and dining room and all that stuff. And then we had 4 bedrooms upstairs, so we had way too much room. And we said, okay, this is actually kind of perfect. And so we made a bid, got the home, and overpaid for it. We paid more than the rest of the market. It was on the market for like 6 months or something like that and didn't sell. And then we ended up buying it at that price. So it was probably a dumb idea for a realtor to go out and not get a great price, which I would have loved a great price. But I had other things that were there that were considerations. And, we needed a larger style home. That's the only way you're going to get wide aisles with not such a big budget. And so we bought that home, got kind of in a way, didn't get the greatest of deals. And then I can't remember, 12 years later or something, we sold it. Well, we did work and all that stuff, but we sold it for the highest price ever for a home in that area. And so, so it can all work out in the wash is what my point is. Sometimes you don't need to get caught up on trying to get that great deal necessarily. What you need to do is make sure it fits your lifestyle, because we were able to weather it with time. Over, I think it was 12 years later, my wife was not as excited about the neighborhood as I was. I loved the neighborhood. She wasn't so crazy about it, so we then packed up and moved to a neighborhood that she was more excited about, and moved on. And I would say the same thing for you is that if you can put yourself into a situation where you can look long term with your purchase, it's all gonna come out in the wash. And I mean, I know it's a hard time right now, and I know we've been fielding a lot of calls, people saying how difficult it is to buy a home, prices are ridiculous and all that thing. And I do agree with all of that. However, there's really not a lot that we can do about that. The only thing that we really have control over is our mindsets. And so I think more than, and I was watching a podcast that had actually talked about the fact that earning $100,000 or $200,000 today still doesn't give you the lifestyle that you used to give. That $100,000 or $200,000 income doesn't go as far as it used to. And so life has got to change. Right now, we know the cost of everything has gone up. It's extremely expensive just to live now. It used to be that we would go out with the family, and I remember being upset because we would have a $100 and something bill, or sometimes a $200 bill, depending on the restaurant. And now, that would be $400, and it's like, what the heck? There's no way. You can't. It's not, to me, It wasn't worth it back then when I did it for 100 and change. At 400, like I lose my mind. There's just no way. And so going out for dinner and things like that now is like, for me, it's just like, no, I don't like that. This is crazy. You're exchanging a whole bunch of money to nurture your body, and I think I'd rather get some salad and do something at home and save that money. But nonetheless, here we are. Mindset becomes very, very important. And if it's not really for you, because I do understand, as a parent, your life is your life and you're on your track. And it's probably not going to adjust unless you go through some huge changes. But your children's life is still there to be shaped. And if they are filled with a whole heap of restrictions and what's not possible and what's impossible and all that stuff, that could hurt them moving forward. So that's why I say it's kind of really important. I remember this one situation. This was in our new house. We had our baby, our oldest one. Our youngest one wasn't born yet. Our oldest one was 6 months old. And I was playing around. We've always had dogs, and we had cut a hole in the wall and had a doggy dorks put in so the dogs could go in and out of it. But the person who put it in, and I guess it wasn't perfectly centered or something. So when the dog would come in, the doggy door would rub against one of the sides and stay up. And at that time, we had a walker, which they're illegal now, but it was a walker that's on wheels. And she would run around in that walker. Now, we felt safe with it because there were no stairs. We felt safe with it because there were no stairs, and the stairs to go down. There were stairs to go downstairs, but they were entrapped in a door and walls. There was no way for her to fall anywhere, so it wasn't a concern for us. But I understand today, rules are different, things are different. But she was in that walker. And she was 6 months old, and I was cracking a joke. So I am a pretty sarcastic guy, gets me in a lot of trouble, but nonetheless, it is who I am. And I just said to my daughter, I go, Julie, go close the doggy door. Darn, she rolls over. She's 6 months old. She rolls over to the doggy door and closes it. I'm like, this girl can't talk. She can't whatever, but she knew exactly what I said. And it was like, whoa, everything that you say. And I don't know at what age it is that she was understanding us, but at 6 months, they can't talk, but they know what's going on. So, my point is they're impressionable. And so, be good, try to allow them to believe that whatever they think they can do, that they may be able to do it. It's a better mindset than, I'm limited. So be careful of that. And, I hope I'm getting my point across. My point isn't simple. I'm not telling you how to raise your children or anything of that nature. I can't do that. But what I'm trying to get across is that they learn from their environment a lot. And as a matter of fact, I have this theory, which is probably not correct, but I have this theory that when kids find out that their parents are hypocrites, they start to turn on their parents and they're with their friends. And what I mean by that, and I don't mean it in a negative way, it's sort of poor wording, but what I mean by that is that as parents, we try to tell the kids what the perfect thing to do is all the time, but we don't do the perfect thing. And that's where we're kind of hypocritical. We're putting them at a much higher standard than we ever did ourselves. And that can be tough on kids, and they can rebel and then, be there with their friends and not. I just have like 2 minutes left. So what I would like to say is that I got very lucky. Probably wouldn't have been a great parent. I don't know. But I've been very, very, very fortunate. What happened was when we had our grandmother, my grandmother, who's a very strict, the reason why we had a strained relationship is because she would beat the living daylights out of me for like nothing. And that's why Children Aid wouldn't let me live with her. And rightfully so, I would have went crazy. So she was a very tough person. And then we had Jackie's mother there. So now inside the house, we had the dynamic of Jackie's mother protecting Jackie, my grandmother protecting me. If Jackie and I even had two words that were opposing, it could start World War III in that house. My grandmother would, either tell Jackie off, tell Jackie's mom off or something. And then Jackie's mom would then that's it. She would tell my grandma, and it would just be World War III. And so Jackie and I, and the reason behind saying all that, when we were in that situation, we never could fight. We never could have a disagreement. We just had to be the peacemakers. We had to be the ones that were, happy-go-lucky about everything. And that turned out to be a blessing for our children because they never saw that. They see it a lot now because the pressure isn't there. But Jackie and I, we will have disagreements and we just don't care about the disagreements because we respect each other's point of view, even though it's not ours. But I hope that this story has touched someone's heart, and I hope the best for everyone. And I really would like to see Canadians not lose faith in the real estate market because it really is one of the only ways to help to secure our futures. And so that's why I think it's a good idea to continue to figure out how you can stay and weather the marketplace. Thank you for listening. This has been your home, your money, and our lives on realityradio101.com. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Your Home, Your Money with your hosts, Randy, Jackie, and Anthony, right here on Reality Radio 101.